You know that feeling, right? You reach the end of your day and you're just completely, utterly, cognitively depleted. You aren't physically tired, but your brain feels like it's trying to wade through wet cement. You're dealing with deep, chronic burnout. It's this exhausting loop of stress and cortisol overload that honestly no amount of sleep seems to fix. If that sounds familiar, trust me, you are far from alone. Modern life just places this extraordinary, unnatural demand on our nervous system. But what if the real problem isn't just the chaotic world around us? What if it's actually a background process running right now in your own neural architecture?
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're skipping the generic feel-good wellness advice. Instead, we're diving straight into the hard, clinical neuroscience of meditation. We're going to look at this practice for what it really is, a highly specific, evidence-based neurooptimization protocol. We're going to explore how simply directing your attention can act as a literal, physical hardware upgrade for your brain, restoring your focus, regulating your nervous system, and building deep, lasting emotional resilience.
All right, Section 1. The bug in the OS, the default mode network.
Okay, to understand how to optimize the brain, we first have to understand the bug in our operating system. Think of your brain like a smartphone. Right now, a lot of us have a background app aggressively draining our battery, leaving us with zero processing power for the things that actually matter. That background app, it's called the default mode network, or DMN. It's the network that lights up when you aren't actively doing a specific, goal-oriented task. It handles mind-wandering, self-referential thought, basically the story of you. Now, in a healthy state, this is perfectly fine. But under chronic stress, the DMN goes into absolute overdrive. It traps us in this exhaustive cycle of negative rumination, worrying about the past, agonizing over the future. It's an incredibly expensive neural process, and it's exactly why you feel so foggy and fatigued.
It creates a really stark contrast in our neural architecture. Picture the stressed brain. Your DMN is hyperactive, spinning up all that exhausting rumination, while your amygdala, your fear center, is highly reactive, just pumping cortisol into your bloodstream. Now contrast that with the optimized brain. Here we see thicker cortical tissue, attention networks fire with beautiful efficiency, and rumination is actively silenced. The big question is, how do we cross that bridge? How do we get from a state of chronic burnout to that optimized neural state? That brings us to Section 2, the circuit breaker, rewiring attention.
We desperately need a neural circuit breaker. We need an intervention that forcibly quits that battery-draining background app so your system can finally recover. Well, when you engage in a focused attention meditation practice, you are literally changing how your brain networks communicate in real time. The DMN experiences what we call hypoconnectivity, meaning the rumination network is actively suppressed. Simultaneously, we see hyperconnectivity in the frontoparietal network, which handles your executive control, along with your primary attention networks. So meditation isn't just about relaxing, it's actively strengthening your executive focus while putting a muzzle on your wandering, anxious mind.
This functional shift creates something neuroscientists call anti-correlation. In experienced meditators, fMRI data shows a powerful anti-correlation between the attention networks and the default mode network. Basically, this means the exact moment intense, deliberate focus turns on, your exhausting rumination network is completely shut down. They stop competing for resources. And having this strong anti-correlation is actually considered a major biomarker for overall brain health and cognitive longevity.
So you might be wondering, okay, how long does it take to actually see these software changes? Surprisingly, research shows that a single acute 10-minute session of mindfulness yields immediate, measurable boosts in cognitive performance. Subjects show faster tactile reaction times, better temporal order judgment, and a surge in alpha and theta brainwaves. It drops you into this highly desirable state of relaxed alertness. Your brain is totally dialed in, highly responsive, but completely calm.
Let's move to Section 3, the hardware upgrade, structural neuroplasticity.
Those functional software shifts, they're really just the beginning. If you consistently run this new programming, your brain actually upgrades its own hardware. It takes remarkably little time to see physical changes in the brain's architecture. Longitudinal studies show that after just an 8-week mindfulness program, MRI scans reveal a measurable increase in gray matter concentration in the left hippocampus. This is a huge deal because the hippocampus is your control center for memory, learning, and emotional regulation. In just 2 months, you are physically building a denser, more capable learning engine.
In the long-term data, it's even more staggering. Normally, as we age, our cerebral cortex naturally thins out, leading to cognitive decline. But neuroimaging has shown that the average cortical thickness of a 40 to 50-year-old meditator literally matches that of a 20 to 30-year-old non-meditator. Just think about that for a second. By simply directing your attention every day, you are effectively preserving your neural tissue and hitting pause on cognitive aging.
Let's break down exactly where these structural upgrades are happening. We already mentioned the left hippocampus for memory and learning. We also see increased gray matter in the right anterior insula. That controls interoception, your ability to sense your internal bodily states, which is absolutely crucial for high emotional intelligence. We see increased density in the medulla oblongata, regulating autonomic breathing and heart rate, directly optimizing your nervous system. And finally, the right hemisphere as a whole, essential for sustained attention, physically becomes thicker. You are quite literally building a more robust, resilient brain.
Section 4. Decreasing stickiness, emotional resilience.
So, what does a thicker cortex, or a suppressed DMN, actually mean for your average Tuesday afternoon? Well, it all comes down to emotional resilience. Clinical data reveals that this protocol physically reduces amygdala activation when you're exposed to negative stimuli. Usually, when a highly stressful email hits your inbox, or someone dangerously cuts you off in traffic, your amygdala just screams, flooding your system with cortisol. But with this practice, your brain strengthens the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Your logical brain gets significantly better at pumping the brakes on your emotional brain.
There's this fantastic quote from the source literature that I think captures the psychological payoff perfectly. Non-reactivity leads to unlearning of previous connections and liberation from being bound to habitual emotional reactions. It's what I like to call the extinction of stickiness. When something bad happens, it doesn't stick to you and ruin your entire day. You observe it, the emotion flares up, and then it simply passes without dragging you down into a spiral of rumination. That right there, that is true neurobiological freedom.
Finally, Section 5. The protocol, the minimum effective dose.
So we've mapped out the neuroscience, the network connectivity, the structural plasticity. Now, what's the actual actionable protocol? What is the minimum effective dose required to execute this and see real clinical benefits? A massive 2-month longitudinal study tracked over 1,000 meditators to find the exact dose-response relationship. And here's the biggest takeaway. Frequency matters way more than duration. A little bit every single day beats a marathon session once a week, hands down. To see clinically meaningful improvements in general well-being and life satisfaction, you need to hit about 35 to 65 minutes of practice daily. If you are specifically targeting mental health outcomes, like actively reducing psychological distress or anxiety, that optimal dose bumps up to 50 to 80 minutes daily.
Now, I know 50 minutes might sound like a huge stretch for a busy professional, but here is your stepped pathway to integrate this seamlessly. Step 1. Just start with 10 minutes a day. Like we saw earlier, 10 minutes is completely enough to acutely boost your reaction time and clear that brain fog for your immediate tasks. Step 2. Build the daily habit. Make it completely non-negotiable, just like brushing your teeth. Consistency is the true driver of neuroplasticity. Step 3. Once that habit is locked in, gradually scale your time up to that 35+ minute threshold so you can secure those deep, long-term hardware upgrades, the thicker cortex, and the calm, regulated amygdala. We've seen the fMRI scans, we've reviewed the structural data, and we've decoded the protocol. The reality is, your brain is not a fixed asset. It is dynamic, living hardware that molds itself entirely around what you repeatedly pay attention to. The fog, the burnout, the chronic stress, they do not have to be your permanent operating system. You literally have the tools to rewrite the code today. So I want to leave you with this one thought. If you could structurally upgrade your brain's hardware simply by directing your attention, what are you going to focus on next?